The largest countries in the world meet to discuss three hugely imperative items. They are corporate taxes, carbon emissions, and vaccine equity. This meeting is known as the G20 Summit, and each of these items will affect you in some way. So, did they accomplish anything? Let's find out. Let's start with the basics. What is the G20? You hear G7, G8, G20. What are all these? Well, each is a coalition of nations, and the number represents how many nations are in that group. The G7 are the 7 industrialized nations. Because of a political tiff, we don't have the G8 right now, it's just the G7. The G20 is, see if you guessed it, a group of 20 nations. It includes the G7 plus all these countries and the EU. So the G20 is a really wide umbrella covering a huge portion of the Earth's population, governments, and countries. In fact, the G20 is responsible for 80% of the planet's carbon emissions. More on that in just a second. But what do the G7 and the G20 do? Well, they like to get together and talk? No, but seriously, they are discussing pressing global issues and proposing solutions. And as a big-time heavyweight, these countries can throw their own weight around to make solutions become a reality. This year's G20 had 3 major agendas: agree upon a minimum global tax rate, address the need to reduce carbon emissions, and delivering vaccine equity to developing nations. Taxes first. They came to a landmark agreement on a corporate tax rate of 15%. May not sound big, but across the board, it's pretty pivotal. That means big multinational companies like Nestle and Apple will be required to pay taxes where they make money rather than where they've chosen to be domiciled. You see, for years, Ireland and Hungary have maintained notoriously low corporate tax rates as a way to entice big companies to set up facilities there. These big companies are in the business of making money, not overpaying taxes. But this 15% corporate tax floor eliminates much of the generous tax havens they've enjoyed for decades. This is major news, decades in the making, but it isn't set in stone. On Twitter, Joe Biden called it more than just a tax deal. It's diplomacy reshaping our economy and delivering for our people. Let's meet in the middle, Joe. Let's call this what it is. It's a blueprint. It isn't settled yet. The G20 can agree upon this with each other. And since this is an international agreement, it's essentially a treaty. In the US, what happens with treaties? Well, they have to be ratified by a 2/3 majority in the Senate. In today's political climate, we'll see how that goes. Another hot topic at the G20 summit was vaccine equity, with the majority of the world still lacking access to vaccines. Calls for wider distribution by industrialized nations has grown louder. President Biden previously pledged 500 million Pfizer doses for the international community. Now, Prime Minister Modi has pledged to donate 5 billion doses of India's vaccine. The G20 moved up their goal of vaccinating 70% of the world's population from the fall of 2022 to the summer of 2022. Much of the hesitancy is logistics related, involving the temperature-sensitive nature of the mRNA vaccines. And the G20 reaffirmed its commitment to net zero carbon emissions. They did this at their gathering, but then followed it up with a climate summit in Scotland called the COP26. The biggest agenda for the group was a pledge away from coal power. Coal is one of the largest sources of CO2 emissions being sent into the atmosphere right now. This pledge has a few prongs. The first is heavy coal users like Poland and Vietnam agreeing to phase out coal entirely. Another prong is industrialized nations like the US declaring an end to financing foreign coal. This is a pointed message directed at Russia and China, 2 big polluters who are notably absent from all of the events. But are we setting ourselves up for the do as I say, not as I do moment on the global stage? Consider that 80% of global carbon emissions are coming from G20 member states. And the 2 themes I'm hearing from these leaders are net zero and phasing out coal. But net zero doesn't mean less emissions necessarily. We've talked about this on my videos in the previous about carbon offsets, how companies are using carbon offsets to reduce their emissions, but only on paper. Many times they aren't actually emitting less CO2. There's also a concern that the dirtiest of businesses are piecemealing out their most toxic assets, selling off their dirtiest, high polluting components to privately held companies. Companies that aren't subject to as much scrutiny as BP or Exxon, for instance. Scientists estimate that 100 companies are responsible for 70% of global emissions. So this was a quick recap of the G20 summit. I think we as citizens need to stay focused on the agreed initiatives and make sure that we hold the politicians' feet to the fire to make sure they actually make some of these become a reality. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.